Welcome to today's episode of the Denver Broncos' quest to plug their roster holes ahead of the trade deadline. The deadline is on November 4th, and the Denver Broncos are trying to win a Super Bowl this season. Unfortunately, I don't think their roster is quite in a position to do so. The trade deadline could be the perfect opportunity for the Broncos to bolster some of these weaknesses and put themselves in a much better position to compete for a Lombardi Trophy this year. Today, we're going to continue our series talking about wide receivers. It was reported by Mike Kliss the other day that the Denver Broncos might be looking to make an addition at number 2 receiver. We already talked about Treylon Burks, who the Denver Broncos are going to bring in for a visit, I believe, tomorrow. But I don't think Burks is going to step in and be your wide receiver too. We talked about Rashid Shaheed, current Saints wide receiver. That's a more realistic option. But today, I want to focus our attention on another New Orleans Saints wide receiver who is getting some trade rumblings, and that is Chris Olave, former first-round pick. Let's go ahead and bring in Olave's stats. He was drafted in the first round back in 2022 out of Ohio State, and if you guys will remember, New Orleans actually traded up to get him. They sent a first-round pick the following year in 2023 to the Philadelphia Eagles to come up to get him. Unfortunately, these past couple of years, he's struggled with injuries. His first 2 years, he looked really good. He played in 15 games in 2022 and then 16 games in 2023, netted over 1,000 receiving yards in each season, 4 touchdowns as a rookie, and then 5 touchdowns as a sophomore. Unfortunately, last season, he dealt with some really significant injuries, including multiple concussions thanks to hospital balls from Derek Carr, and he only netted 400 receiving yards in 8 games last season and 1 receiving touchdown. He has played in all 6 games to this point in 2025, but his yards per reception is way down. His worst was last year, 12.5 yards per reception. This year, he's only averaging 8.8 yards per reception, and I'd actually say he's getting some of the best quarterback play of his entire career right now. Spencer Rattler, if you watch the film, is playing some really good football. In 2022, he had Andy Dalton as his quarterback. The previous 2 seasons, he had predominantly Derek Carr and then rookie Spencer Rattler, who just was not good. But this year, he's got much better quarterback play, and his receiving numbers are down in terms of yards per reception. What does that mean? Does that mean that Chris Olave is on the decline? I don't think so. He shouldn't be from an athletic perspective. The dude's only 25 years old. But that is noteworthy. Another thing that's noteworthy if the Denver Broncos were to trade for Chris Olave is his contract situation. He's in year 4 of his 4-year rookie deal, but then he's got his 5th-year option next season, which the New Orleans Saints did pick up. So he's got a $6 million cap hit this year. His cap hit would shoot up to $15 million next year. But make no mistake about it, if the Denver Broncos were to trade for Chris Olave, they would have to pay him. Now, how much would the Denver Broncos be willing to give up in terms of draft capital to get him? I'd be willing to give up maybe a 2nd-round pick, but there are some other factors at play here, which we'll talk about in just a second. But that might be the number in terms of the draft capital. But let's go ahead and look at his contract situation here. Where would he be paid in terms of average annual value? The guaranteed money is another thing to think about as well, because he's got an injury history. Do we want to guarantee a bunch of money to a guy who's got a history of injuries, which we will talk about later on in this video? But you look at some of the higher paid wide receiver 2s in the NFL. You've got Jalen Waddle, you've got T. Higgins, you've got Devontae Smith. So I'd imagine that he's probably looking for at least $25 million a year in average annual value. Think about this, though. Courtland Sutton, the Broncos' number 1 receiver, is getting paid $23 million in average annual value. And if they were to get Chris Olave, there would be plenty of targets for everybody. Cortland Sutton, he's a bigger-bodied receiver, so he'd play the X position, which he plays already. You'd see Olave maybe alternate back and forth between the Z position, where you can put him in motion. He won't line up on the ball, so that way he won't deal with a ton of press coverage. Or sometimes he'll play in the slot as well. So you could make it work there, but Sutton, he's your top receiver, and he's making $23 million a year. Could you justify the guy who's basically coming in to be your wide receiver 2 making more than your wide receiver 1? Possibly, because that's just the way the market's going right now, but I don't know. It might not be good optics, and it might not be good in the locker room. I'm not experienced enough to speak on that. But here's the big thing with Chris Olave that really detracts him, and I don't really want the Broncos to make this move just for this reason alone: the injuries. The injuries are really, really bad. The concussions scare the living hell out of me. He missed multiple games due to a concussion last year. 8 games for one concussion, and then 1 game because of a previous concussion. So he had 2 separate concussions in 2024. Then 2023, concussion. 2022, concussion. 2020, concussion. And I don't know about high school. This only goes back to college. So maybe he had some other concussion in high school or Pop Warner or some point earlier in his football career. So, yeah, man, anytime you've got a guy with multiple concussions, that's a red flag. And it's for that reason that I'm not making this move. I like Olave as a talent, I like him as a young player, and I think that he's got a bright future in the NFL if he can stay healthy, and that's not a gamble that I'd be willing to take if I were the Denver Broncos. He's got multiple coaches who are here in Denver, who were in New Orleans when they drafted him, including Pete Carmichael, who was his offensive coordinator, so that might be a reason why the Denver Broncos would look into this, but I would rather continue to develop our current wide receiver core with guys like Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims. I'd much rather continue to develop our 2 young receivers in Mims and Franklin as opposed to going out and making this move. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, Broncos country. Do you think the Denver Broncos should go out there and trade for Chris Olave? Do you think this would be the right move? Or are you like me and do you feel like Rashid Shaheed would be the better move for the Denver Broncos if they were to go after a Saints receiver? Or are you happy with the current receiving core right now? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts, as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. Additionally, if you guys want to go above and beyond in supporting the channel, please consider becoming a channel member today. I would really appreciate it. It's not mandatory whatsoever, but if you want some extra perks and incentives in exchange for helping me out and helping the channel grow, I would really appreciate if you would consider it. Link in the description below. Alright guys, and until next time, I'm your host Gage Madrid, saying peace out.